Iowa football is front and center here at the Voice of College Football this afternoon. We welcome all of you in just about 10 days before Big Ten Media Days. And we got Corey Brada on the line from the Hawkeye of the Storm. You can catch his podcast, the video version, right here on YouTube. You can also check him out, as you will see the banner in just a second, on his Twitter feed and the audio podcast as well. Corey, how you doing today?
Doing good. It's a nice day here in Iowa. We had some tornadic action yesterday. I did a little, maybe I shouldn't say this publicly because I'll be berated for it, but I did a little storm chasing myself. And yeah, it's a lively time here in Hawkeye Nation. And we've got, a month and a half before we're kicking it off for the season. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. And, recruiting has been even more prevalent in the college football news this summer than it typically is because of COVID and the dead period running all the way through the end of May, and where recruiting would have followed its typical trend throughout the calendar year, and there would have been a lot of student athletes making their crucial visits during the winter quarter and then making decisions earlier. Of course, we just had that flood of visits, official and unofficial, over the course of June, and now we're seeing commitments roll in. Maybe not as many commitments on this Iowa side as Hawkeye fans would like, with 7 hard commits. It's currently, this is a very early ranking, of course, but still, we're headed toward the end of July, and we've got a number 58 ranking nationally, according to 247 Sports, and it's last in the Big Ten. So are there concerns, and do you think they're legitimate?
I think they're legitimate. They're concerns. I don't know about worries. I think the biggest concern at this point, like you pointed out, is number. I think at this time last year, Iowa was a top 20 class, maybe even top 15. I know they dropped a bit as time went on, as they always will. But yeah, they've missed on some guys. They missed on a tight end here that ended up picking an SEC school just a couple of weeks ago, a guy that I think Kirk was pretty high on as far as his chances to get. Carson May did commit to Iowa, so that's a positive. Quarterback out of Oklahoma, a guy that, Hawk fans love to get excited about quarterbacks. They've got excited about Deuce Hogan, but he's riding the bench. So you never know with these guys. But he's a pro-style kid. I think he's 6'5", 6'6", big kid, so he fits the mold of a Ken O'Keefe, Kirk Ferentz quarterback. That's a positive. I mean, they've got a couple of offensive linemen in this class here in the past few months. Cale Crow out of Huxley, actually just about 10 minutes south of where we are here in Ames. So that's a positive. I think you're pretty much going to get that every class. I don't know if it's and I know I mentioned this to you before we went live, Mark. I don't know if there's still some lingering effects from what happened last year as far as the off-season issues. I hate to think that from the sake of Kirk, who I think has taken a number of steps to get past the issues. I don't know if there's still some lingering hesitancy. I don't want to assume that it's a racial issue, but there seems to be a bit of a slow patch, and maybe part of it is because of COVID. I mean, you mentioned it, but yeah, I mean, as far as this class, I think the kids they've gotten, they feel good about. Jack Dotzler is another one out of big kid out of Wisconsin, 6'7" offensive lineman, who I think fits the mold again for a typical Iowa tackle. So, maybe you play him at tackle, or maybe they can transition him to tight end if they don't get, they've got to figure out a way to get a tight end in this class. There's no question about that. But, he's a kid who maybe can develop there. So I don't know. I think this class is very integral to the future for Kirk Ferentz. If he can't seem to move this, I know rankings don't mean a lot, but if this class ends up, causing issues if he doesn't fix this class in the coming months, as far as getting more commits that they feel good about, I could see this being the beginning of the end, so to speak, for Kirk Ferentz. And I think we're close to that point anyways. I think anybody who thinks he's going to be coaching longer than 3 or 4 years at the max is probably not real close to the program. But I could see, we don't know what's going to happen this year. This is the first full year after COVID, but it's also the first full year after the offseason issues. And we haven't really gotten rid of these offseason issues. People probably saw in the national media this week, CBS Sports did an article, I'm sure other news outlets did as well, about the lawsuit now. Urban Meyer's involved. The Jags GM is involved with this. And of course, that lawsuit is against Kirk Ferentz, Brian Ferentz, the University of Iowa. So there's just a lot going on. The fact that the class is so small right now is not a good look. How much that plays into the final rankings and the actual talent in this class long term, I guess we'll just have to wait and see as far as implications are concerned.
We always invite everybody's comments and questions. We would ask that you would like the live stream, share it out on social media. Just grab the link and share it on Facebook and on Twitter. The Rod Favre is taking the line of questioning here and the conversation to the next degree in regards to Corey has certainly addressed the first part of the question, but would Kirk Ferentz's son possibly be the coach in waiting, as is talked about around college football circles? Bob Stoops, Mark Stoops, people like to conjecture, of course. What is the talk around Iowa football circles?
Well, people love to talk.
I believe Corey, if you can still hear me, we've lost your audio, I believe. I'm no longer hearing it. Hey, Corey, can you hear me? Can't hear me either. What in the world just happened? Okay. Sounds like everybody in the live chat can hear me, but not Corey. We're going to communicate that to him because he obviously can't hear me either because he's not responding. It looked like a good answer. All right, let's see if we... All right, so everybody can hear me. Corey has obviously determined his issue, or that he has an issue, so we apologize right there. I have no idea what happened because I didn't touch anything here, and suddenly I didn't even hear any kind of a clip or anything. Just all of a sudden, his audio, which was crystal clear, just vanished out of nowhere. So I don't know what happened there. So what do? We go to your comments. So I will let everybody know that for anybody who joined us for the Phil Steele live stream at 1 o'clock Eastern time, we had some audio issues there as well. I will say that I've learned a few things, that even though I didn't cause the audio issues, I now know how to remedy the situation. So we had, unfortunately, Phil, there was miscommunication in regards to the number in which he should call. And so he was calling my personal line, and it was causing all sorts of issues that could not be resolved. I made all sorts of adjustments and it didn't work. Anyway, we had no audio for 20 or 22 minutes. Then we were able to get, I just basically told Phil, call the call-in line, and I gave him the number to call through the call-in system. We got Phil on the line for about 7 or 8 minutes after that, And therefore, I pulled that video down because I didn't want all that dead time being an issue. And so I'm going to repost that video with just the good portion. And that's going to post at 5 o'clock Eastern time. So if you missed our conversation with Phil Steele, you will be able to catch up with that at 5 o'clock Eastern time. I'm going to repost the video with Phil Steele. It was a great conversation. Unfortunately, we went through all sorts of good topics about the 12-team playoff proposal, about the current 4-team format. We talked Cincinnati, Michigan, Oklahoma, Ohio State quarterbacking situation and how that could impact the playoff. We talked about his formula. We talked about maybe throughout his research this spring and summer, what surprised him. And then I basically needed to recycle the entire conversation in about 7 minutes. So we just kind of ran him through it right after that. So we hope you enjoy that. Again, that's going to post at 5 Eastern. Unfortunately, Corey must be having more audio issues. When he first joined me and before we started to go on live, he was having some issues with the setup. Then it was fixed, and then it suddenly just disappeared on us in regards to the audio. If you see a difference on the set here, look at that. I get comments on a consistent basis. Why don't you have a blank helmet, Auburn helmet, Penn State helmet, Nebraska helmet, whomever it is? Well, we had our guy Paul contact me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Anybody can at any time. You can get a hold of me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. And so Paul, what he did was he said, Mark, I want a North Carolina helmet. I said, send me one. It showed up. We took it out of the packaging just now. And I even told Paul, because of his contribution, I said, hey, Paul, I'm going to display that North Carolina helmet, and I'm not going to move it from front and center on the top shelf for 1 month. It's going to be up there for 1 month guaranteed, except if we're doing another team live stream or team specific video, then we'll display the appropriate team. But other than that, Paul, you've got my guarantee that for 1 month at least, North Carolina is going to sit proud right on the top shelf in the middle. Dying breed. Iowa's been trash since 1985-86. No quarterback's worth anything since Chuck Long. Well, if you're looking for elite quarterback play, I would agree with that. Chuck Long almost won the Heisman Trophy. He won one of the closest votes, lost one of the closest votes ever to Vincent Jackson in 1985. And since then, they've had a number of good quarterbacks that were good enough to not just make an NFL roster, but play in the NFL, play for periods of time, but no great quarterbacking out of Iowa. True. I would say top 25 quarterbacks, not top 5 quarterbacks, and there's a considerable difference there. Wouldn't call Iowa trash. They did come within about that much of a distance in 2015 of going to the college football playoffs. That's not exactly trash, 12-1. And they've had a number of other years. Shoot, Ohio State needed to convert a 4th and 20 to deny Iowa of the Big Ten championship outright, and the Rose Bowl in 2008 and 9. It took Ohio State down to the wire, one game in overtime. The other game went down to a 4th and 20 play, and Terrell Pryor bailed out the Buckeyes to keep Ohio State in the top spot in the Big Ten and deny Iowa of winning the conference. So, trash? No. I have great respect for the Iowa program. They seem to be somewhat stuck in the 8-4 mode forever. and would like to do better, I'm sure. I made the comment the other day about Mike Gundy possibly being the most comfortable coach in college football, that he could probably go 8-4 forever and keep his job. Believe we've got Corey back. I hope so. Corey.
I hope so too. Can you hear me, Mark?
Don't.
Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Okay.
We still can't hear Corey. So he's going to give it another shot. Somebody had asked about well, before I get to that question, SEC Dog does not understand the Iowa State hype. I know it's the offseason and all, but come on. Well, Iowa State came within one score, came within a throw to the end zone of winning the Big 12 championship last year. Okay. Iowa State has its quarterback back, who's probably the second best quarterback in the conference. They have their running back, who may be the best in the nation. They have their best wide receiver back. They have their entire offense back. They have all 5 starting offensive linemen, plus the key backups. They have like their top 8 offensive linemen back. A number of NFL general managers once said, besides the starting quarterback, the position that they look at in trying to evaluate who's going to do what the next season is how many offensive linemen do you have back, especially off a good offensive line. So Iowa State's loaded on offense. Everybody's back. One of the best tight ends in college football, Charlie Kohler. Not significant losses on defense, a few losses on defense, but they bring back one of the best defenses in the country. That's what the hype's all about there. All right, let's try Corey again.
Let's hold our breath. Still nothing?
No, we don't have you.
All right.
And they can wrestle in Iowa. There's no doubt about that. Chuck Long at Oklahoma. Yes. As the OC. Mike 3883 is challenging whomever made the comment about Iowa being trash and not producing quarterbacks. He says always produces some of the best quarterbacks. Mike? What else do we have? Yes, Jordan, we are expanding all the time, trying to not expand too quickly and not be able to keep up, because that's always a difficult equation. I lost my editor this past month or 6 weeks. And so I've been editing until like 4:00 in the morning, and I'm so far behind to keep up with these 22 channels. So that's got to be fixed. Sebastian, I know that you've requested week 1, a preview of the week 1 games for a long time, and we'll get to that. And we've started down that route, a number of live streams where I pegged week 1 as being the topic. And then what ended up happening was I just got a flood of phone calls and we never really got to it. So Sebastian, we will focus in on week 1. You've got some time here. You do have some time. But Sebastian is looking for that Iowa-Indiana game that's a week 1 game, or Iowa-Indiana. I know it's early. Is it week 1? That's a huge game. Plus 5.5 Indiana must be on the road at Iowa. You know what? If there's a 5.5 point spread on an Iowa-Indiana game, the way Iowa plays defense and is conservative for the most part on offense, then you take the points. Take the points. 5.5 points in an IU Iowa game. Take it. SEC Dog is looking for predictions. We always make predictions, of course. I've been making college football predictions since 1982. So I will always make the predictions. I explained this the other night that I'm in the habit of waiting till the last minute and making predictions, but that's not necessarily the way that should be approached on YouTube, because of course you want people to watch the videos, and once a game's played, then nobody cares about predictions after that. So instead of forecasting the season as I typically do the night before the season starts and unveil all my predictions, yes, I should do that early. I'm sure there are predictions by all sorts of people out there right now, but I will unveil mine and need to do that soon. I think what has become the standard, it seems online, is for people to give their game by game predictions. I'm not really big into that. I've done it a couple times. I think it's more important to just lay out the conference race and the overall records. And as long as you say, okay, well, there's a tie right there, but I am determining that that team is going to break the tie and win that showdown, that game between those two teams. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I may just give my predictions and not go game by game, but just give my final predictions and throw up Ohio State and say, this is what they're going to go. They're going to go 4-8 and kind of guesstimate the schedule and give it to you like that. And then I'll have, maybe you guys can complain if you don't like it like that, if you want the game by game prediction results. Good to see you, Sebastian. Good to see Cheryl. As always, your new camera is crystal clear. And I just found out, Cheryl, actually, that it could be even more crystal clear than it is. So right now we're operating on 1080p. So I think we're at maximum efficiency here. I posted a video this morning on the UCF Florida series and realized that even though the camera upgraded the picture quality a lot, that I could have done even better if I am able to take it through the camera. And I won't go through the big explanation, but if my learning curve jumps a little bit even further, I should be able to clean it up even more. So thanks for noticing. SEC Dog is saying that he watches every SEC game because upsets happen every single week in the SEC and all other big games. Plus, I like to know the competition in the SEC. Well, I would say, SEC Dog, that another reason why I like playoff expansion is because we're going to see more upsets involving games that matter. Right now, we have hardly any upsets involving games that point toward the playoff. It's the most predictable sport on the sports landscape right now, involving the championship. Now, if you want to take teams 10 through 50, if you want to take that layer of teams from 10 through 50, there are upsets all over the place. I've got this narrowed down to this. I can tell anybody that wants to put money on games, I can at least tell you this. Take the top 25 games every week, which there are typically 20 to 25 games, because if everybody in the top 25 plays an unranked team, you got 25 games. But of course, there are a few teams that play that are ranked. Okay, take those 20 or 22 games every week. There are going to be just slightly over 20%, 20 to 25% of those games are going to be upsets every week. It's like clockwork more than 90% of the time. So if you are looking for upsets, just know that there are going to be 4 to 5 per week in the top 25. You can just lay out all the top 25 games and you can say, I don't know where these upsets are going to be, but I know that they're going to be 4 or 5. And they're there. And then if you count them up at the end of the games that weekend, you'll see that there are 4 or 5 upsets. Hey, Sonny, good to see you. I think Bielema does the job I think he can do at Illinois, that he's the next Iowa coach when Kirk Ferentz retires. He's an Iowa alum. Of course he is. That's an interesting choice right there. That's logical thinking. SEC Dog is coming around to the expansion because the players at the Sugar Bowl, et cetera, don't matter no more. I'd like to see on-campus playoff games to the higher seed. I would as well. Ohio State, according to Mike 3883, is the most experienced, has experienced the most playoff significant upsets. Okay. Yeah. Everyone points to Purdue. That knocked them out in 2018. Iowa, that knocked them out in 2017. And actually, even though it wasn't a huge upset, it was a fairly sizable upset when Ohio State lost at home to Oklahoma earlier in 2017. They were a 7 or 8 point favorite in that game. Now, against Iowa, they were a 17 or 18 point favorite. And against Purdue, they were like a 4 touchdown favorite. So that was significant. Yes, absolutely. But if you take Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama to start out, they are not getting upset as many times as they could be under other conditions, meaning if we took other samples of time throughout college football history, we would find so many more upsets involving and impacting the national championship race. For anybody out there that has a Mac or uses Apple equipment, just the slightest grazing of a thumb or anything, I just wiped myself off the screen momentarily just by, swiping my hand on the trackpad. I hope and pray we've got Corey with audio. Corey.
Let's give it another shot, Mark. You still can't hear me?
No, we can't hear you. Can anybody else? I just want to double check that it's not me, because it hasn't been in the past, but we want to double check. I'm asking everybody out there.
It's got to be on his end.
Do you hear Corey? Oh, you hear him? The Rod Farva says that he can be heard. Okay, Random says
hear me, Rod?
He
That's
can be
great.
heard. Now, why can't I hear him? This is just the oddest thing. Okay. All right. Corey, I'm going to set you up with a question. You take it from there. And in the meantime, I'm going to do my best to correct whatever's going on my end now, I guess, that's causing me not to hear you. So I think we were in the midst of, you had addressed Kirk Ferentz, the offseason, and then we received the question from the Rod Farva concerning possible candidates to replace the head coach going forward, and that the two Stoops and Bret Bielema was brought up in the live chat as well, and also Kirk Ferentz's son. And I will let you take off on that since we missed your, I can be assured, eloquent answer the first time around. And in the meantime, again, I will figure out why I can't hear you.
Well, I feel good that the problem wasn't on my end. I'm happy about that. I know Mark won't hear this until later. But in answer to your question, Rod, again, and maybe you heard part of my response earlier, the Bob Stoops idea obviously is being tossed around everywhere. Knowing that Kirk is probably not here for more than 3 more years, I think if Iowa had the opportunity to nab Bob now, I think it's a fair question. How do we make that transition? But you really can't let go. I mean, obviously you're not going to let Kirk go for no reason, but Bob's a program changer. I mean, I think everybody would agree to that, whether you're an Oklahoma fan or not. So obviously that would be your number one attempt. But I don't know in 3 years, when assuming Kirk retires in 3 to 4 more years, I don't know that Bob's going to be on the market. I just don't. I just have a hard time believing that he would be. And I also don't know if he's not if he's on the market then, and he hasn't accepted a major job by 2024. Is Iowa that much of a dream job for Bob? I don't know that. Obviously, Mark is more of probably a reasonable question. Maybe Iowa has an opportunity to steal him. I mean, the Stoops family obviously is an Iowa family, and Bret Bielema. I mean, the same way. I mean, everybody knows about the tattoo, the Hawkeye tattoo that Bret has. It'll be interesting to see what he does at Illinois. I mean, obviously, if Bret has a lot of success at Illinois, I mean, Illinois is one of those programs that should be able to sustain success. I think it's probably one of the more underachieving programs in the country, just given the recruiting base that they have there. And I love Lovie Smith, but he was never really able to grab the in-state talent that he needed to make that program successful. So yeah, I think if you look at it from that perspective, Bob is obviously the number one choice, but he's probably the least likely. And then depending on what happens with Bret, yeah, I mean, if he succeeds there, maybe he's an option in 3 years. If he doesn't succeed there, no Iowa fan's going to want him back anyways. I just wonder if he would leave if he's successful in Illinois again with that recruiting base. I don't know why he'd want to leave that landscape. And Mark, can you hear me again now? Or are we
I can. Good? I caught most of that answer, I believe.
Man, I tell you, I was going on my phone. I was switching out microphones, switching out computers. So that's what happens when you go live.
I think basically my audio issues have rubbed off on you. So Corey, you're probably home free on the blame. Everybody can blame me because we had audio issues earlier on our 1 o'clock live stream with Phil Steele. And so they just kind of carried through.
That makes me feel better. It makes me when I'm on your show, I feel I was starting to get a little upset. So my wife is probably a bit stressed out later, so I'll have to make amends tonight.
I will take the hit, it being my channel, my show. I will take the hit. Bob Stoops, at the time that he was at Oklahoma, even though he was in a high pressure job, major program, top of the line, did a great job, regardless of what some people may say about his shortcomings in national championship games. One of the marks of his tenure there, though, was that he led a very balanced life for a football coach. He wasn't one of these just maniacal guys that just was obsessed with the job, slept at the office. No, he very much put in play a balanced life and lifestyle with his family, and then communicated that to his coaching staff as much as possible at this level of football. And so the reason I bring that up is, on one hand, I would think, okay, as you just stated, is Iowa a big enough job for Bob Stoops? At the same time, maybe he's looking for somewhere that he can. And you would have a better gauge of Iowa football from that standpoint than me, because it's a big time program. It's Big Ten football, competing and wanting to win championships, millions of dollars on the line. So there is a level of high pressure, but I think at the likes of Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, they look at places like Iowa where you can just go, be comfortable, run your football program, go to a bowl game and be okay. And there's not much pressure. And I don't want to discount that or take that to one extreme or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And I think, like it or not, the fact that Iowa over the past, 42 years has had 2 head coaches. That's great, but it's instilled that feeling around the program. And I think across the country, that kind of a reputation. I think Bob, though, I'm not sure that Bob is one of those guys that you talked about balance with his family. Is he going to come out of retirement 5 years into it to go coach at Iowa? Where, again, is he going to be able to have any more success at Iowa than he did at Oklahoma? I don't see how that's possible. Again, I don't. I just can't read which Stoops am I looking for? Bob Stoops' mind, because he does have close ties to Iowa. I mean, he's a Hayden Fry product. Who knows? I mean, I don't know that that question's ever been asked of him. I would love to hear his response. Obviously, he's not going to say anything too pervasive with Kirk still at the helm, but I think he's got a lot of respect for Kirk. I think what has been done at Kentucky for Bob's brother, I mean, it's been impressive, although Kentucky's been kind of up and down these last couple of years, but certainly he was the guy that people were talking about 2-3 years ago. And now he's kind of taken a bit of a dip. So was there somebody else in there? Brian Ferentz. I think Rod mentioned Brian. Yeah, I mean, Brian, the thing about Brian is I don't think he's going to recover from the allegations this past offseason. I don't know how first of all, there's still an open lawsuit that the school is dealing with. And we mentioned earlier that Urban Meyer and the Jags GM is now involved with that because of their attempt to fraudulent, as people would put it, attempt to hire Chris Doyle. And so there's a lot that can play out there. I just don't know from a perception standpoint. Brian hasn't done enough to overcome the perception. That's the problem. I mean, I think people understood 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that Brian's probably the next guy in line. And I don't think a lot of people loved that idea, but we kind of just accepted that that's probably what's going to happen here in Iowa. But now with what happened, Brian's got a reputation of this. Obviously, 2017, he had an issue in the press box with an umpire. He's had issues publicly with some of the things he's said. He's gotten himself kind of in trouble in the past. And now, of course, with the allegations this offseason, or this past offseason, I just wonder if there's too much mud that's been thrown on him to really overcome, whether it's right or overcome it with sort of a mediocre resume. I mean, Iowa's offense has not really, in my estimation, it's taken a step forward from the Greg Davis era, but I haven't seen much of any difference between the Ken O'Keefe era and the Brian Ferentz era. So I don't know about that one. I just don't think. I think Kirk would love that to happen. I think, obviously, I mean, he's his dad. I mean, I think that's pretty clear that blood's thicker than water, but I just don't know that you're going to be able to overcome that perception.
And that's one of the things I wonder about Bielema, getting back to Bret's situation and his background, his past in connection, obviously, to Iowa, that I would think in his heart of hearts, that unless he had some horrible experience at Iowa, which I don't believe is the case, I believe that he had a great experience based on every discussion I've ever heard him talk about his alma mater, that in his heart of hearts, he would choose Iowa over Illinois. But
I don't know.
Necessarily.
I don't know about that because, again, I think and maybe I'm giving the Illinois recruiting landscape way too much credit, but I just think there's been so much underachievement there that it's possible that he hit a gold mine with that job because, I mean, he failed at Arkansas. I think most people would agree with that. And so to get that job, and I think it's because, again, there's been a lot of failure at Illinois. So he was able to kind of nab a job that I just think is got a possibility. If Illinois if he can elevate that program within 2 to 3 years, that again, I just think Illinois, I'm not saying they're going to be a national power, but I definitely think they could be a power in the West. And so 3 years down the road, if he's on the uptick with them and Kirk Ferentz is kind of winding down at Iowa, I don't know about that jump.
So where I was going with that line of thinking is that it's just logical to think that anybody's connected to their alma mater to a certain degree. Okay. Past that, like you, I see the Illinois job as not necessarily a sleeping giant, but to be better than what it appears in the win-loss column over the last decade or more, where if you ask most college football fans, what's the better job, Iowa or Illinois, they're going to look at the results on the field, and almost everyone's going to say that Iowa's a better job just because the results produced have not even been close. But when you look at, as long as that head coach can go to Illinois and say, okay, I'm getting the investment from the administration, the resources, the facilities I need to compete, the recruiting footprint is substantially or decidedly better I don't know if it's significantly better. Decidedly, I don't think there's a question there. So if Bret Bielema fails at Illinois, he's obviously not going to be a candidate for the Iowa job. If he does too well at Illinois and figures, hey, I'm knocking out 9 or 10 wins a year at Illinois and competing for the Big Ten Western Division, I'm in a good place. I would think that he needs to win at a decent rate and elevate the program to maybe bowl status to then be a candidate for the Iowa job and think, okay, maybe I can take the next step and go to Iowa and I can win more there.
Yeah, I think if Brett's winning 7 to 8 games on a regular basis at Illinois, I still wonder, as probably demented as this sounds, because Iowa is a 7 to 8 win program virtually every year, maybe 9 or 10 on certain years. But I still wonder if that's enough from an Iowa fan's perspective to allow Bret to make that jump here, because we're talking about perception and we're talking about Brian Ferentz with perception. You just mentioned the perception around the Midwest as far as college football is concerned in the Big Ten is that Iowa's a better job than Illinois. I mean, you and I, being people that are looking at it a little bit closer, we both agree that potentially that could be flipped in the coming years. But I think that perception is still there. So I don't know that Iowa fans are going to be jumping all over the idea of a Bret Bielema who's come off, a season or two at 7-5 and that failed at Arkansas and that sort of hurt a lot of Iowa fans' feelings already at Wisconsin. I just don't know that Iowa fans are going to be jumping all over that. But yeah, there are definitely options. And I think one thing that Iowa fans are, some Iowa fans are a little bit tired of is assuming that Iowa has to stick to the Hayden Fry, Kirk Ferentz mold. I mean, the thing about it is if you look at what Hayden Fry brought to Iowa, he brought total. I mean, when he took over the program, he really did change things in Iowa City, and that stuck for 40 years with Kirk. But I think fans need to not be afraid of moving on from that era. And moving on from that era does not mean Kirk Ferentz retiring and hiring Bret Bielema, or Kirk Ferentz retiring and throwing, pearls at, I don't want to say pearls of swine, but I'm not comparing the Stoops to swine, but trying to nab Mark. Now, again, Bob, I don't think you could turn Bob. If Bob wants this job, you're throwing everything you have at Bob. But I don't know. I think that there's as much of the division there is in this world right now, Mark, from a political standpoint and all these things that we're dealing with as a human race and in this country. I think there's division within this fan base in Iowa. And there has been, and the allegations last year only made it worse. So I think there's fans that just want to move on from the Kirk Ferentz era, want to move on from the Hayden Fry era, even though I think Hayden was an upstanding guy as well, and want to move on with a whole new style and approach. And then there's the fans that are Kirk loyalists and Hayden loyalists. And so, yeah, I'm sure they'd love to see Mark, Bob, or Bret in here.
Bielema had a strange tenure at Arkansas. He had just won a Big Ten championship. He was on the podium hoisting the trophy, and within hours was hoisted away to Arkansas after winning the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis and being given, if memory serves me correctly, like $1.3 million more per year to go to Arkansas. So you make that business decision, you leave for the SEC Western Division. Well, he finds himself in a state that's devoid of high school football talent in a division that's the best in college football, and he's up against it. He tries to play smash mouth, hammer it down your throat football. It worked to a certain extent. They produced offensive linemen for the NFL and mostly running backs like Alex Collins and the like, Jonathan Williams. And he took over a bad program, elevated it year to year. They were winning 1 and 2 more games per year. He gets to an 8-5 level, wins 3 consecutive bowl games. And then they had this odd season where they got off to a great start. They were 7-2. They then just fell off the rails at the end of the year, they blew the final game of the season in Missouri up 24-0. They lose that game. They go to the Belka Bowl and they play Virginia Tech. They do the exact same thing. They go up 24-0. They blow the game. So they finish 7-6 after getting off to that great start. Then he has the one lousy season and he's gone. And so within that, this is how things change so quickly in college football. Like he's riding high at 7-2, and that program's going up the ladder. And within 10 months, 12 months, he's gone after like 10 or 12 bad games. And that's what happened to him in Arkansas.
So I just want to cut in real quick here, Mark. Are you sound like a closet Arkansas fan. You're wearing the dark, you're wearing the crimson, the Razorback colors. And I don't know how you recited. Did you look? I really hope for my prideful
Corey,
self you had to research these things.
Corey, come on. The people have called me the voice of college football for a reason.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you,
numbers and game situations stick to my brain. They just do.
The way you explain that, I think there's, again, back to perception. There's a perception that he really did fail. I said it myself, but the way you explain that, he was that is the toughest division in college football. It's been the toughest division in college football for how many years now, and will be probably until Nick Saban retires. And so, I think he's gotten a bit of a bad rap, but he's also not, let's be honest, Bret's not been the most loyal guy in the world. I'm not saying that he did Iowa wrong by taking the head coaching job at Wisconsin, but of course Iowa fans didn't like it. And then of course, like you said, he jumped ship as soon as he had a high offer as far as more money to Arkansas. So I'm happy for Bret in that he's able to be back at this level and have a chance to compete in the Big Ten. It's not at Illinois, even though they're a border school, there's no rivalry between Iowa and Illinois. I could see him. I could see him bringing that program to 7-5, 8-4 level again. And if he does that, like you said, maybe you get him. Maybe he's in the conversation when Kirk sees the door, finds the door, but. There's that slot, that gap, I think that he's going to have to stay at.
I can't wait to get to the next question based on some previous conversations I've had with Corey. But before we do, I want to clean up a few things real quick. I love this comment coming in from Mike3883. Go follow this guy, everyone. He's been so patient. Okay.
Are they talking about you or are they talking about me, Mark?
They're talking about you. I think Mike's been following me for a long, long time. They're talking about you. My response to that would be very kind of everyone, but that's not the reason to go follow Corey and follow his podcast right here on YouTube and his audio podcast. Is because he's exceptional at what he does, and you can hear it right here in his analysis of Iowa football. So that's no reason to follow someone. I appreciate the sentiment there, Mike, but I think we all need to follow Corey because he knows his stuff. I'm
gonna make sure my wife knows that, hey, I had a plug from a fan today to follow me because of my patience. That'll go over well.
Keep that in your back pocket.
Yeah, I will. I appreciate that though. That's a kind comment. So appreciate that.
And while we're on that topic, you can more specifically let everyone know where you are so they can follow you.
Yeah, from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, our channel, we post our podcast, which we've been spitting out podcasts for going on 7-8 years now. Brada's Branded Thoughts is the name of our podcast, but our content is from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We're hosted by a local news site in Ames, storycounty.news. So you get the kind of play on words from the Hawkeye of the Storm. So we are in Ames, trying to bring some Iowa fandom to Cyclone country. So from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, you can also find From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, basically anywhere. We live in a podcast world. So wherever you listen to your podcast, you can find us. And we also post, just as a side note, we do occasionally post other Hawkeye related content on our YouTube channel. So if you give us a subscription, you'll get regular content. And we have a good time doing it.
We do live in a podcast world, and audio podcasts pay better than YouTube. So I'm just in the wrong deal right here. I should probably move it on. I do have an audio podcast for anybody that would like to just go to any of the major podcast platforms. But full disclosure here, if you're watching what we do here, you're not going to hear anything different there. One of these days, I will dedicate myself to a unique audio podcast, but I basically just strip the audio and put some random content from the YouTube channel on over there. But for some reason, a couple hundred people tend to download those each time I get around to thinking about doing it. It might be 3 consecutive days, and then I forget for 2 weeks, and then I do it. Cheryl's got some insider information here that she's disclosing. So Cheryl is our top moderator, many times our only moderator, but she does an amazing job, and she's a loyal supporter. So yes, as soon as I get around to it, which should be this weekend, we will be launching an Iowa channel. And that's actually part of a greater initiative that I will unveil here in the next couple weeks regarding more content delivery to all of you during the college football season. But we're so pleased that it's because of this guy, Corey, that we are able to launch an Iowa channel. So everybody be looking out for that. I'll, of course, make those links available when they become available. So I wanted to get to this one because we're in the midst of Big 12 Media Days right now. And I have all the admiration in the world for what Matt Campbell has accomplished and is building in Ames, Iowa. But my goodness, people are talking about this at times like, I don't know, that this is an emerging dynasty or something. Okay. The Iowa State program has won 3 and 4 games throughout its history, recent history. He did a great job in elevating it to a lot of 7 and 5 seasons. So if you look at Matt Campbell's run there, it's been a lot of 7 and 5, 8 and 4 with the bowl game in question. And then they took off last year, but the end result was still 9 and 3, which is a tremendous season, but it's not of national championship caliber. Now they are the darlings of college football in many corners of the nation. But they do have a date with Iowa that's not necessarily going to be a give me.
Well, yeah, that depends on who you're talking to, Mark. Yeah, listen, I am so, you'd think, given the fact that Iowa State hasn't beaten Iowa since 2014, you would sort of think that the roles would be reversed, that Iowa fans would be kind of penciling in a win there. And certainly Iowa fans aren't doing that. And I'm not trying to put the Iowa fan base ahead of the Iowa State fan base, but you kind of alluded to it. There is a lot of attempting to switch around the roles of little brother, big brother in this state. And I think it makes sense because when you have 7 straight years of failing to get over the hump against Iowa and a lot of close games. I mean, the Cyhawk rivalry, it's been a great rivalry despite the fact that it's been somewhat one-sided in the win-loss column. But I think so there's just some hostility and some pent-up frustration with the fact that Matt Campbell hasn't beaten Kirk yet. And so I look forward to that game. It just got pushed back to 3:30, which I thought was an odd time for, you're a former ESPN guy. It's an ABC game, I believe, Mark, but they pushed it back from 2:30 to 3:30. So maybe you can give us some insight as to why they did that. I've kind of made that a dark horse game for College Game Day week 2. I know there's a couple other games in the docket that could get in the way of that, but yeah, that game's going to be great. And I'm happy for Iowa State because it only helps Iowa fans that dog on Iowa State and are delight in those 3-4 win seasons. They're probably not either thinking straight or they don't care enough about Iowa football, because you got to realize the more Iowa State has success, the better Iowa's strength of schedule becomes. Iowa's not getting rid of the Iowa State game off its schedule, nor should they, especially now that Matt Campbell has had the success he's had there. It's going to be, I think the quarterback head-to-head will be the number one position to watch. I think a lot of people will be watching the running back head-to-head matchup, but at quarterback with a seasoned guy in Brock Purdy against a quarterback, we assume it's going to be Spencer Petras. Who knows if he comes out game 1 against Indiana and it's terrible, who knows? But that would be his first true road game. I'm not considering anything that happened last year true road games. There were no fans in the stands. So that'll be the first true road game for Spencer against a guy in Brock Purdy who, just like his head coach, Matt Campbell, has never beaten Iowa. Of course, the running back position, I mentioned that. There's just a lot of different spots to look at. It's going to be a great game. And I'll tell you, 2 years ago, that's one of my last great pre-COVID college football moments was heading out to College game day and being able to just witness that atmosphere from the Iowa State fans. And then, of course, as soon as I was done there, I hightailed it out of Ames to have our watch party and watch the game. But no, that'll be a great game. Obviously, Iowa players and the coaching staff, they've got a big game week 1, so they're focused on that once we hit summer camp. But Cyhawk rivalry is alive and well, no doubt.
So, Corey, you're telling me that the game between Iowa and Iowa State is scheduled for 3:30 Eastern or Central?
You and I, we have to make sure on that, don't we? That's kind of a off the record joke, but it's 3:30 Central. No, it was 2:30 Central originally. Are you seeing something differently?
No, I'm not. I haven't looked it up. I'm just trying to clarify this because
3:30. Week 1, Indiana's 2:30, and then week 2 is 3:30 ABC.
Yeah, because anyone that follows television, and again, as Corey mentioned, I was in the industry for a long, long time, and at ESPN knows those broadcast windows, and they've been pretty much the same forever. So I know that now that Fox is on the scene, and has been on the scene for a number of years, but now they're on the scene throughout the entire broadcast day, that they typically have that noon kickoff, of course, and noon Eastern, I mean. And then they actually, maybe because they just want to stagger the games to offset those broadcast windows so they're not in direct competition and they can catch some people and keep them. They usually kick off that next game, not like ABC and CBS and ESPN at 3:30, but that's usually either 4 or 4:30 that they kick off the next game. So that would be a Fox broadcast, but you're telling me that this is within the ESPN family of network games.
And we've had a lot of confusion. You and I have had a lot of confusion on a few different things today. I promise you, it's 3:30 on ABC according to the University of Iowa as of right now. So
that's 4:30 Eastern. Interesting. Yeah.
So speculate a little bit for us, Mark. Is there any? What are the possibilities?
Those ABC broadcast windows have been set forever, noon, 3:30, and so forth. Now the ESPN windows, they get knocked around a little bit. They get knocked off of their noon, 3:30. Sometimes they'll throw in some 6 and 9, right, and depending on who they've got involved. I'm wondering if there's any other sporting events that could be playing with that, the U.S. Open or something.
Well, again, it was originally scheduled for 2:30 on ABC, and it was just changed this past week, announced by the university that it was moved back. So I'm looking here at the week 2 schedule, seeing if I see another game. Let's see. I don't see, and again, I don't know when all these ABC games. I see this could be it. Mark is typically, I don't know why this would be, but South Florida is scheduled for noon that day, noon Central Time. Excuse me, 1 Eastern on ABC.
That's so. It. Now, why they have to play at 1 p.m. Eastern time?
Something going on that morning. I have no idea.
And we're not talking about, a Titanic matchup there. We're talking Florida and South Florida.
Florida, South Florida.
Okay, that's your answer right there. Now, why? I have no idea.
And of course, the big game, Washington, Michigan, is at 7. So I guess they've got the time. They've got that extra hour built in. So. I don't know, but certainly that will be. I'll tell you what it does. I know it's September, so I'm trying to think when the sun sets in Iowa in September. I guess you're looking at. I guess you're probably still looking at a full day game. I was trying to think if maybe there'd be some lights coming on there. Maybe get some lights late in the game, but yeah, I mean that game has been. The games in Ames have been absolutely spectacular as far as crowd. And I mean, I'm thinking even 2015, CJ Beathard put on a show with his feet, threw a beautiful dime to the corner of the end zone to Riley McCarron, threw a dime to Tavon Smith in the corner of the end zone that same game. Jordan Canzeri kind of sealed it with a late score, but that was a great game. 2017 was I believe, I don't want to say triple overtime. I believe it was just 1 overtime. Maybe somebody can correct me on that, but high scoring affair, Stanley versus kid that transferred, I think, from Iowa State to Georgia. Can't remember his name at the moment.
Jacob Park.
Yep.
So Corey, you may guess after I make this comment, you may transition your Arkansas comment to an Iowa State comment that this may be Iowa State colors, because I remember the score of that game too. I believe it was 44-41, correct?
Yeah, that would be correct.
Yeah, I have no investment in these games. They just stick to my brain.
And the very last scene of that broadcast on ABC was Iowa center, now Bears offensive lineman James Daniels in the stands. 10 seconds after the game was over. No, that was those are the types of games that make this rivalry great. And again, it was kind of a weird game because typically we're used to, I want to say, again, maybe you can give me the correct score, Mark, but like 2012, I think was like 9-6. Iowa State.
There was a 13-3 game just 2 or 3 years ago.
That was 2018. So that was Stanley's second win against Iowa State in Kinnick. But I believe
there was a 9-6. Yeah.
Well, maybe it was 2014. Either 2014 or 2012, there was I don't think anybody hit double digits in that game. So we're used to that, and we've had a few outliers. I'm thinking of the Steele Jantz year. You probably remember that. That was triple overtime. Iowa State with coming out on top on that game, and then of course 2017. So you never really quite know what you're going to get. I mean, you could get a 6-9 slugfest, or you could get a 44-41 game. So it's totally unpredictable. It seems like, and again, I'd have to look back at the history of this, but just off the top of my head, it seems like the lower scoring affairs between these two teams typically takes place in Iowa City, where you have the high scoring affairs in Ames. So if history is any indication, and I wouldn't be shocked to see a high scoring game, this year in Ames, given what Iowa State has coming back at running back, at tight end, at quarterback, and then as dominant as Iowa's offensive line was last year, they get a lot back on the outside. Their starting tight end is back. They're some people are touting the guy as a top 5 all-around player. Tyler Linderbaum on the inside at center for Iowa's back. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see another high-scoring affair.
I am not shy about saying that the Big Ten Western Division is my favorite division in college football. I tout myself as being neutral across the board, as neutral as possible, but I will state it right here that the Big Ten Western Division is my favorite division. A lot of people call it boring, that there's just not exciting, flashy type programs and teams, but I just think it's fascinating because now we've got a situation where Bret Bielema is at Illinois, and I would have stated this before he took over the Illinois job, but take Illinois and Purdue out of the mix right now. I don't see them as serious contenders. That you got 5 teams. I would not be surprised if any one of the 5 teams won the division, but I do agree with David Greenshield, who's touting a Wisconsin-Iowa showdown for the Big Ten Western Division. And to extend on that point, I find it intriguing that you've got Spencer Petras, who got off to a slow start as Iowa lost its first 2 games, played much better down the stretch, outplayed Graham Mertz in the showdown against Wisconsin that Iowa won by 3 touchdowns, 28-7. To where Graham Mertz, I think everyone just assumed after he came out with guns blazing against Illinois with the 5 touchdowns, the 20 for 21 outing, that, this guy's a superstar. He's there. But if you look at the game-by-game performance, he really struggled down the stretch, and so did the Wisconsin offense. And the performance of those 2 guys may determine that division.
I agree with you on that. I do want to, and I want to debate you on this, but I do want to kind of confront you on this. You said who are the 2 teams that you said are not contenders in the Big Ten West?
Illinois and Purdue.
I'm assuming you just forgot that Nebraska's in the West.
I did not.
Oh,
Maybe this Nebraska show I do every week is starting to wear on me.
I want to transition. I'll transition a little bit then from the Iowa State rivalry to Nebraska-Iowa. I was listening to your show with Greg the other day, and he compared linebacker Garrett Nelson to Dick Butkus. I if anybody forgot,
that.
they got to come back and look at. They got to go back and watch this tape. But no, I would be shocked to see Nebraska contend for the Big Ten West. And I would honestly, I would probably throw, and maybe I shouldn't do this, but I would probably sub Purdue out for Nebraska. I think I would be more surprised to see Nebraska win the West than I would be to see Purdue, because we've actually seen Purdue. We've actually seen Jeff Brom compete at a good level in the Big Ten. Scott Frost has proved nothing at Nebraska or at a Power 5 level. So I would challenge you a little bit on that, but I think everywhere else I would agree with. I don't think Minnesota. I think Minnesota is going to take a big step back. I don't. Again, it's hard to rate what happened last year with COVID, but you lose your star wide receiver. I think PJ Fleck. I don't know that he's wearing on people. I think he wore on a lot of people in the Big Ten as soon as he got hired. And I wonder if the row the boat type slogan is sort of wearing out in Minneapolis. I think the Big Ten is up for grabs for Iowa this year. I really do say that. And people who, if there's any loyal podcasters on here or podcast listeners on here who've listened to me for many years, they're probably going to call me a homer and say I say it every year. I think this year, honestly, though, given the landscape of the Big Ten, I just don't have a lot of faith in anybody besides Iowa and Wisconsin. Wisconsin took a big step back last year, but again, I think they were just ravaged by COVID. I mean, they were completely ravaged. So, if Graham Mertz can be decent, I think their running game will take a step forward. It took a huge step back last year. That should be that game should have huge implications, as it always does. And I hate to discount Pat Fitzgerald. I think everybody does it every year. I'm guilty of it myself. You kind of take them out of the conversation, and people got to remember that there's a lot of momentum with that program right now. And Pat Fitzgerald reportedly turned down some money this offseason to take his talents to the pros. I just, it's always a scary game, Iowa Northwestern, but I think the entire West should be on watch. So I think Minnesota, Purdue, Nebraska, Illinois, all down. But I would give those top three, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Northwestern, probably an equal chance at this point, in my estimation.
Yeah, I wasn't predicting a 5-team race. I was saying that outside of Illinois or Purdue, I would not be surprised with anybody else winning the Big Ten Western Division. And that does include Nebraska, even though they haven't shown us anything. I think that they've got the roster that I'm not making a claim that their roster's loaded by any stretch, but it's on par from a talent perspective with Iowa and Wisconsin. But I do believe that Iowa, there's more to it than talent on the roster. There's, of course, just the process in play and the execution and the program that's been built at Iowa and Wisconsin have separated themselves to a certain extent. I'm not going to disparage Northwestern. Of course, they won the division 2 of the last 3 years, but I think they may down cycle a bit this year. But, there are college football analysts out there, Corey, that do rank Pat Fitzgerald as the best coach in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any complaints with that. Well, hey, I don't know how anybody could argue with it.
Even above Ryan Day.
Well, I mean, everybody wins at Ohio State. I know that's easy to say, but I'm not taking anything away from Ryan Day. He's been terrific. But I will say, as far as the Nebraska conversation is concerned, and I'll just leave it at this. And I know for some reason, there's a lot of animosity between Iowa and Nebraska fans. But I know, again, being here in Ames, there was a lot of animosity between Iowa State and Nebraska fans when Nebraska was in the Big 12. So I think this is sort of sometimes Nebraska fans just get on people's nerves. In fact, my roommate, when I first moved to Ames years ago, my roommate was from Omaha, or actually from Lincoln, and was a huge Nebraska fan. So I have nothing against Nebraska fans, just for the record. But I think we have to see Nebraska. You have to take steps forward. We've got to see them actually become bowl eligible. I mean, we actually have to see them make a bowl game, I think, before we're
True.
talking Big Ten West championship. And Mark, would you? I know you mentioned talent, and I haven't really delved into talent rankings across the Big Ten as of yet for this coming season. But would you rate Nebraska's talent ranking in line with Iowa or slightly above Iowa and Wisconsin? I guess throw them in the mix.
The previous comment I made was based solely on recruiting rankings, that the recruiting rankings are similar, if not Nebraska is better than the other two over a 4-year average on the roster.
I asked that question because the wide gap right now in development between Wisconsin, Iowa, Northwestern, and Nebraska is so wide. I think Nebraska would have to, at this point, until they can until Scott Frost and that coaching staff can prove that they can become. I know they don't want to. I know fans don't want to accept that. I don't think in Lincoln that they need to be a developmental school, but until they can prove that they've got to do either one thing. They've either got to close the gap in development, or they've got to really, really exceed expectations on the recruiting landscape. And maybe, again, I don't follow Nebraska recruiting like I'm sure you do. But I don't think the gap between Nebraska and then those other three schools is wide enough in recruiting to make up for the lack of gap, or excuse me, the gap that we see with Iowa, Wisconsin, Northwestern in development. That would just be my 2 cents on it. But I don't mean to turn this into a Nebraska show.
Well, it may do my channel some good if I would do some more crossover conversations and, for example, bring you over onto the Nebraska channel to call those Nebraska fans out. That would be phenomenal.
I may lose subscribers if we do that, Mark.
You would lose them. I would gain them.
You would gain them. Okay. I'll be the sacrificial lamb.
That's it. There were 3 stats as we leave Nebraska alone as soon as I mentioned this that I just thought were startling concerning Nebraska football. And I wondered how they possibly won 3 games last year out of 8, because they had one of the 5 worst turnover rates in the country offensively. They had one of the 5 or 10 worst turnover rates in the nation defensively. So you're turning the ball over offensively. You're not getting turnovers defensively. Okay. And we know that turnovers kill a game, because every time you turn over the ball, unless it's at the 50-yard line, even that's not a good thing, of course, you're either denying yourself a scoring opportunity or you're basically handing one to the opposition. And then on top of that, Nebraska was the worst in the nation in explosive pass plays. They only had 4 pass plays go over 30 yards last year. So you turn the ball over, you can't get the opposition to turn it over, and you've got no explosive plays in the passing game. How do you win anything?
Well, they're winning the line of scrimmage, apparently. I mean, that's only
exactly.
Right?
That was my conclusion. You must be beating them up on most of the plays, but the big plays are going against you, but you're beating them up front. Exactly. That was my conclusion.
I think that's fair. So I think theoretically, looking at it from a Nebraska standpoint, you could argue that they're not far off. But I think those turnover woes, and again, I'd have to look back at past season stats. I think those turnover woes really stretch back into the Bo Pelini era. Tommy Armstrong was, I mean, his turnover issues were well documented. So I don't think this is just a Scott Frost problem. I don't know if you can call it a culture problem. I think theoretically the culture changed or shifted, from the Bo Pelini era to the Riley era to the Frost era. But I think the turnover issue has been an issue throughout the line of scrimmage. I will say this: if you go back and watch that game last year, and I'm sure you remember that game.
Oh yeah.
Iowa didn't dominate. I mean, Iowa dominated a lot of teams last year on the ground. That was a weird game, and it kind of always is. So it's hard to rate. But I don't remember Iowa dominating that game on the ground like they did Minnesota, Michigan State. I just thought that was a little bit peculiar. And now, given those season stats for Nebraska that you threw out, I think that makes more sense. So yeah, I mean, there may be more development along the line. I think, I don't know. I guess my big thing is, how do you have, if they are winning the line of scrimmage like those stats would have you believe, why are there issues with your snapper constantly throwing the ball above your quarterback's head? Why is that an issue? I mean, that
the last week of the season, this isn't in week
No.
one either.
It just, to me, and then you have your head coach basically trying to throw a 21-year veteran head coach who's been in the Big Ten this entire time, throwing his staff under the bus for clapping. I don't know. If the development, because I think you would agree with this, development, especially at this level, it has to be founded on discipline, and that's exactly what Kirk Ferentz and this staff has done. I think Barry Alvarez and every head coach he's had in Wisconsin, he's instilled that same discipline, on both sides of the ball. But in order to develop guys, you have to have discipline. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense how Nebraska has been able to, how they were able to last year win the line of scrimmage. Like, again, those stats would make you believe, and yet not be able to rein in turnovers, not be able to get your snapper to snap the ball to your quarterback. It just seems odd to me. And I think my biggest question with Nebraska since the Scott Frost era began was discipline and culture. To me, there's been a lot of trash talk. There's been a lot of, even from day one, that the Big Ten was going to have to change for them. That's just, I don't think that's going to cut it. If you're going to want to become that developmental program, you're just not going to get by that way. So, but you're more of an expert than I am on it, Mark. So I think Nebraska fans will be happy to hear that they're at least in the conversation this year. And I would definitely put them above Illinois. For the record, I would definitely put them above Illinois. And probably I have a hard time going further than that, but definitely above Illinois. And again, I don't have much faith in Minnesota this year either.
6th place in the Big Ten Western Division, according to Corey, something in that range for Nebraska.
I think that's fair. And I think is that a step up from last year?
I don't think so. They were 3-5 last year's.
Illinois,
yeah,
that's the thing. And so I go back to your remarks about theoretically them dominating inside and winning plays. How much do you attribute that to a change in culture and a change in program development, or do you attribute it more to COVID did a lot of crazy things for a lot of teams, and it was the result of, Penn State, Minnesota. I don't know if they played. I think they did play Penn State last year, right? Penn State, Minnesota, all these other teams having down years. I think we're going to have to see that again to be able to really take stock in it.
We got Corey Bratta on the line from the Hawkeye of the Storm right here on YouTube and also on your favorite audio platform. So along the same lines, Corey, got 3 stats concerning Iowa football from 2020. And again, these statistics are more valid in a normal 12-game season or 13 games. So the abbreviated season in the Big Ten, only 8 games for Iowa, but still, each one of these 3 statistics is extreme, meaning 2 of them extremely good and 1 of them extremely awful. 81.3%. So what that alludes to is that Iowa kept opponents off the scoreboard on 81+% of the offensive possessions in 2020. They allowed 17 touchdowns, 3 field goals, 107 drives. That was the best stop rate in the country.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you get with Phil Parker, COVID or not. I've said it before, I think on your show. He is the most underrated defensive coordinator in the country. I'm biased because I'm here, but he is terrific. And I know we've ran through in the spring. We ran through concerns and positive takeaways from spring. And I am not concerned about the defense whatsoever. I know the secondary has gotten gouged at times in past seasons, but they have a lot of experience coming back. They got Matt Hankins back for an extra year. Was one of the few guys to come back for a kind of a COVID redshirt, if you will, type of year. Riley Moss is a guy that is back again as well. And then you've got Terry Roberts and you've got several other guys. Sebastian Castro's back there in the secondary. I don't worry about the defense. I mean, I just I have faith in Phil Parker, and if a fan doesn't have faith in Phil Parker after all these years, they don't understand how big of an impact he's made. Even when Norm Parker was the defensive coordinator, the impact that Phil made with that secondary, even back then, was tremendous. And now we're seeing it sort of become the norm under him, norm under Phil, no pun intended there. Defense is not a concern. Those numbers bear that out. And so as it often does, it comes down to, at Iowa, quarterback play. Can you control the offensive line, can you control the line of scrimmage on both sides, really, but especially offensively, and get that running game going, which of course is going to do huge things for your passing game, and it's going to make things a lot easier on a young quarterback like Petrus. But no, the defense it should be stellar again this year on all counts, I believe.
This statistic basically contributes to the previous statistic I just read, that Iowa has the best stop rate in the country. Iowa last year only allowed an explosive passing play on 1% of the dropbacks by its opponents. That was the best rate in the country.
Explosive play. That's Phil Parker's motto: limit explosive plays, take explosive plays away. And I know there's this kind of feeling around the Iowa program that Iowa's defense is the boring, running attack on offense, play action, passing, and then of course on defense, bend don't break. But I mean, it works. I mean, the numbers bear it out. I think back to I want to say 2017. Iowa, Penn State inside Kinnick, and Saquon Barkley ran for, I swear it was like almost 300 yards in that game. And yet Iowa should have won the game. I mean, Penn State racked up all kinds of yardage in that game. And had Iowa been able to get one final stop, had Amani Hooker gotten his hand up, another inch and deflected that ball that went into the end zone to Juwan Johnson, Iowa would have been 4-0. And who knows how that season would have changed. Of course, ended up being there were some great moments that year with the win over Ohio State. Had a chance against Wisconsin late in the year to kind of take control of the West. So that would have changed everything. So the bend don't break philosophy works, as much as people want to say it's boring. And the thing about it is too, I think sometimes you think that bend don't break means that you're always just going to allow a ton of yards to be racked up against your defense. And I think the turnover numbers, I don't have the stats in front of me, but Iowa's ability and Iowa's reputation for developing cornerbacks and even linemen sometimes that are picking balls off and recovering fumbles. I mean, the turnover rate for Iowa's defense has been exceptional for many years. So bend don't break doesn't mean that Iowa's not going to grab turnovers. And so I don't know how any fan could complain about Phil Parker in this defense.
So on the flip side of that statistic about limiting explosive plays, and then coming off our conversation about what troubles that the Nebraska offense faces, Nebraska was in the bottom 5 in the nation in explosive plays in the passing game. Iowa was worse. They were in the bottom 3.
Offensively. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. And Spencer Petrus' lack of ability to be on time with his receivers is going to be an issue. I mean, I don't think Kirk Ferentz will stick with Spencer past game 1 or game 2 at the latest if Spencer is not leaps and bounds better than he was the first half of last season. They're not going to die. I really believe that, and this is maybe being negative now, and people will call me a traitor to the program, but I do not believe that Iowa will be as dominant on the ground this year, even though I think Tyler Goodson will be better. They lose Mekhi Sargent, who very underrated for his contributions at Iowa, was a multi-year starter and then kind of took on that secondary role with Goodson last year, but kind of a change of pace guy. He's gone. And so they're going to need Petrus to be able to make plays with his arm. And he was able to do that. He made a play or two against Illinois late in the year last year. He made a play or two, a couple big plays against Wisconsin that really sealed that game. But yeah, explosive plays are an issue. And it's not just been Petrus. That's been an issue And now, of course, they lose their two best playmakers on the outside in Brandon Smith and Amir Smith-Marset. So theoretically, that does not help the cause. He does have weapons coming back. What we saw in the spring, to me, was not any indication that he's taken that next step forward. The players and coaches will have you believe otherwise, that he's really reined in his accuracy. It's kind of the same deal with Nate Stanley on a maybe a grander scale. Nate Stanley had a huge arm. We saw what he was capable of against Ohio State, just his ability to, I think of the play to the back of the end zone. I don't know which defensive lineman it was for Ohio State that had him wrapped up. And I mean, he just slung a ball into the back of the end zone to TJ Hawkinson for a touchdown, was kind of almost indicative of his entire career at Iowa. He had the ability to make just unbelievable throws, and then he'd have the ability to make complete head-scratching throws, and that's sort of Petrus on a larger scale. Huge arm, big body, but when a play breaks down, A, he doesn't have the ability to get out of the pocket and move, and B, he's just not consistent enough with his accuracy. And so I think fans should – I think as fans, Iowa – if you're an Iowa fan, you wish that Iowa could have a couple you wish that Colorado State came first this year. You wish it wasn't Indiana. You wish it wasn't Iowa State, because last year, that loss against Purdue was a killer week one. I mean, it really hurt Iowa in the race. And of course, the Northwestern, though both those two losses were huge, and those are the only two losses. I get it, but once Petrus was given some time to get his feet under him, he was able to develop. So you just hope that he comes out guns blazing, accurate game week one this year.
If Iowa doesn't blow a 17-0 lead against Northwestern, then they're playing in the Big Ten championship game opposite Ohio State. And even if they pull off the upset, they probably, because of the lack of games, don't get the nod for a college football playoff, but they are the Big Ten champions and headed to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and if Brian Ferentz doesn't call 51 pass plays, maybe they can sustain that 17-0. That's the kind of thing that, going back to the coaching conversation, there's too many of those. There's not enough. Look at this. The Ohio State win in 2017 was a, hey, look at what Brian Ferentz did moment. There have been too many 17-0 blown leads against Northwestern, or single digit outputs, or inability to run the football type games, that I think it's hurt his reputation. But you're absolutely right. That it felt like Kirk Ferentz's world was kind of crashing in on itself at that point. I mean, coming off the offseason issues, the lawsuit. Remember, this lawsuit was announced by these former players the week before the Purdue game. You go into that Purdue game, that was a game they blew. Had it not been for a couple fumbles in that game and boneheaded plays, you're probably going to win that game. You lose, and then you blow a 17-0 lead. Things were really ugly with a quarterback who did not look comfortable at all. So I give Kirk a lot of credit, but you're absolutely right. Those two games affected the Big Ten race, and yet another moment in Iowa, Kirk Ferentz's history at Iowa. You wonder what if.
As we wrap it up here, a Silent Elysium asks a question that may be a legitimate question. It is a legitimate question. I think some people ask these questions when we get certain programs on here just to kind of poke them a little bit, thinking they've never won a national championship. I'm going to ask them how many national championships they won. I'm looking at 5. Lewis Papp has commented in the live chat as well. And the topic of national championships in college football is one that, depending on my mood, either irritates me or delights me, because I love to dive into it and really dissect it. And I've produced 5 or 6 videos about disputed national championships, which to a certain degree, I believe that they all are. So claimed national championships for Iowa, we stand at 5, 1921, 22, 56, 58, and 60.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? And I got ripped the last time I said the last time that Iowa had won a Big Ten championship was 2002, and it was actually the 2004 year. So I was going to kind of defer back to you on that. But yeah, I think when you get back into that era of the 50s and 60s, with all these shared titles, it's harder to really gauge. I mean, honestly, I don't, when you're talking 60, 70 years ago, I I have a hard time really putting any stock into those numbers. Yeah, I'm not going to come on here and say that this is the year that Iowa changes that.
One step at a time. Big Ten Western Division Championship. Start with that.
Yeah, and like I said, I know we could go on forever about this, but I think the schedule's tough at the outset. You make it through those first 2 games, and there's an opportunity for Iowa to take firm hold of the West, because the Big Ten schedule, you avoid Ohio State. I know you're higher on Nebraska than I am. I'm down on Minnesota, down on a lot of the teams in the West.
Don't overplay my Nebraska comment. I just said I wouldn't be shocked.
I'm just trying to help.
Won the division.
I'm just trying to help your channel, Mark. But no, I think the schedule shapes up nicely for Iowa if you can get past week 1 and week 2. And again, week 2 has nothing to do with the Big Ten title. Let's make that clear. The Iowa State game has nothing to do with the West, but of course, momentum-wise, it will certainly play into things.
I always enjoy these questions, and again, when I say enjoy, I put that in quotes, meaning when you can Google something, why are we here? All right, Google that and find the answer, because Corey knows it, of course, and I do as well. But we can always Google certain things very quickly. All right. Corey, we appreciate you being here. And again, everyone, check out the banner here. Corey Bratta, his podcast is From the Hawkeye of the Storm, both here on YouTube and on your favorite audio platform. And Corey and myself are building out an Iowa channel. We hope to have other contributors on there as well. And I will let everyone know when that is up and running. Corey, thank you so much for your time.
Mark, I'm just happy we got through the little audio issues earlier. And I'm so happy that now I can go to my wife and apologize and tell her that I'm a patient person and that I've got somebody to back me up on that. So thank you, whoever that was that commented that.
Well, I don't know what kind of impact taking part and contributing here on our channel has had on your life, therefore your wife's life, because it sounds like some contributors come on here and their wives aren't necessarily happy with me because I've taken up too much of their time.
You know what? The past year and a half that we've had with COVID and the amount of time that I've spent with family and my wife, certainly, I think a little bit of away time is not going to make her too upset. So she probably will write you a big thank you card for it later, okay. Mark.
We'll take it. All right, Corey, it was great to see you, and great conversation as always.
Good to talk to you, Mark. Thank you.